Welcome to Your Moving Mind, where we talk about mindful movement, small habits that can make you a better person, how to learn, change, and grow, and how to express ourselves fully in body, mind, and spirit. Your Moving Mind with your host, Michael Landau. All behavior is driven by belief. So before we address how to learn, we must first address the underlying beliefs we hold about what is possible. Jim Quick, in his book, Limitless. So we're into 2024 already. It's January, and it was this time to ask ourselves, how are we going to make this year better than the previous one? How are we going to make the best of it? How are we going to make ourselves the best version of ourselves? Always a good question to make, whether in January or at any moment. And I've been thinking about limitations. I feel limited. I believe you feel limited in some ways. We are aware of our limitations. We cannot do just anything. I cannot just jump from the roof and start flying, right? So we have some concept of limitations. Okay, and I started reading Jim Quick's book, Limitless. This book gives you tools to expand your abilities, what you can do with your mind, how you can learn, how you can apply your learning in a limitless way. And it made me think about my perceptions of my limitations and what it has to do with what I teach, with the wisdom that I try to share, with my perception of myself in movement, in action, how I can improve that, and how I can change my reality by changing my perception of it. And it made me think about our perceptions of limitations. We perceive limitations as part of reality. There are some things I cannot do by definition. There's my age, there's my injuries, there's my body structure that allows me to do some things and not other things. There's my financial situation, my education, my health. These are things that I perceive as parts of reality that create limitations, right? And bear with me, just for the heck of it, I'm going to say wrong. Let's look at it a little differently. The way we see reality is always an interpretation. Always. There is no way I can relate to reality without being the observer that sees, observes, takes in whatever it is that my senses give me and interpreting it. The interpretation of my perceptions is part of that reality, and I cannot just leave it aside. So what we call reality, the world outside and the world inside, me in the world, all of this is a story. It's a story that I keep creating, but I've been creating it since I was born. I give sense, I give meaning, I interpret everything, all the time. There's no way out of it. My only relationship with what I call real is through my mind. Of course, I'm the observer. Even science is catching up with the fact that the observer creates reality. You cannot separate the observer from the observed. So this may sound like a philosophical idea that has nothing to do with real life. Like, what do I do with this idea? So reality is mind's creation. So what? It's still out there. It still limits me. Okay, so here's my point. My perception of limitations is a choice. It's part of a story. This story I've been telling myself for years and years. It is not something I can discard just by deciding to tell myself another story, but it's a story. And it's changeable. it is not the only story possible. So let's talk about penguins, okay? I've been going to this place in the north from here, about 5 hours to the north of Chile. There's an island that is off limit for people, and penguins live there. It's a species of penguins that are typical for Chile. They're small. You know, penguins, they don't really have legs, like these spherical bodies with little feet. And they go up a hill, a very steep hill, and you can see them walking up this hill with those impossible feet that they have. If they were thinking like we think, they would probably think, I'm not made up to climb hills. I don't really have legs. How am I supposed to walk up there? But they lay their eggs at the top of the hill. It's pretty steep, it's rocky, it is not a comfortable walk. It doesn't look very friendly for people even, and we have legs to climb up hills. Do they perceive their short legs as limitations? No, they walk up the hills because this is what they do. This is where they lay their eggs, this is where their little chicks are born, and they have to walk down into the water as tiny little things with hardly any legs at all. Are they limited? No, they have the legs that they have. They do what they have to do. Limitation is not really part of the story. How does this apply to us? We can understand that our perception of limitation is a choice, and we can choose otherwise. So as a first step, it's interesting to just put it out there as a hypothesis, as a possibility. And then comes the difficult part, of course. How do I change the story? If my perception of the world is a story, and I can tell myself another story, how do you do that? It sounds like a theory that is quite remote from our daily life. So I mentioned flying. I cannot just go up the roof and decide that I can fly and jump off. We know what's going to happen, right? But in other people's stories, we're not really limited by space and time. Shamans journey, they have these out-of-body experiences, and they can travel away from their body into different places and different times. And if you're a skeptic, look it up. There are some good registered cases where it's been tested. You choose not to believe it, okay, but it's a possibility for other people in other cultures that tells themselves another story. And they come back with information that they have no access to in conditions as we know them. So what for us are very clear, very tangible limitations, for them, they're just not there. They have a different story of what's possible, of what reality is. So, okay, how does this apply to us? Most of us are not going to become shamans. We may not ever have this experience of journeying away from our body or away from the here and now. How can we become limitless? And looking at it from the lens of what I teach, what I understand, what I know I can do, and I can maybe even help you do it, is working with a self-image. And I work with movement and the perception of movement and the creation of movement and how movement is planned, developed, and improved in our mind and then in the world. So self-image in the very fundamental form of the brain maps that I have of myself, my body, its possibilities of acting and being in the world. This is like the foundation of self-image. This is what we start with as little kids. We just start creating brain maps of our body parts and ourselves in movement and how we can manage and control movement. And we start creating voluntary movement. And on top of that, we then build our psychological self-image, how we see ourselves in the world. But changing, working with the self-image on this very basic level, is really a tool for changing my possibilities, for changing what I perceive as limitations, for becoming limitless. The potential to improve, to grow, to be better, to do better, to create new skills, to improve old skills is limitless. There is no end to this journey. And this is what I'd like to suggest as an idea of being limitless. So it's not a pep talk like, you can do it, come on, yeah, get your energy up. I'm not that motivational speaker who can pep up your energy and make you get out and do things. That's also a way to expand your limits. But what I'm suggesting is just the observation of the possibility of growth that is infinite. And we do this by creating a learning space. We create a learning space in our whole being, with our bodies in movement, which is the most direct, the most accessible way of dealing with reality as an individual. The reality of myself in movement. The potential for growth, for improvement, for learning is infinite. In this respect, we are all limitless.